Bloggity Blog, I write about Canadian entertainment, and I think the first form of entertainment for me was watching these next guests when I grew up. It's unbelievable. Has anyone ever seen Anvil or Bret wrestle before, live? Nice. Was anyone at the Canada Stampede? Nice, a couple of you. All right, excellent. Well, you guys don't want to hear from me. Let's bring out Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And there's a phone up here, so we can just... Excellent. All right, so here they are, guys. Do you guys want to ask questions, or I can get started? If anyone has a question, raise your hand. All right, right up front. While you're getting up there, I have to ask, where did you guys come up with the pink and black for your costumes, uniforms?
The truth is, we had a lady back then that used to make our wrestling gear, and I remember we used to call her, we'd say, we need a new color, because if you remember back then, we used to have the blue tights with a black stripe, and I think we had maroon with a silver stripe. We had a few different colors, but we kept asking her for a new color, and she kept saying, I don't really have anything. I said, all I got is a hot pink. I kept going back to Jim, I said, all she's got is a hot pink. And he, I remember the first time, he goes, nah, we never wear hot pink. And then I came back and said, nah, hot pink's not going to work. And then says, we didn't get any gear. We just kept waiting. And I called her again about a month later, and she said, nothing for new colors. I said, she kept talking about this hot pink. And I went back to Jim, I guess, and she got this hot pink. And Jim had a change of heart. He kind of, everybody's pulling on his beard, and he was like, I like it. And it was like, at the time, Adrian Adonis was doing we had the pink tights with Jimmy Hart. And we just showed up at it's kind of a funny story, because I remember we were at catering for a Saturday night main event, and Vince McMahon was there with Dick Ebersol from NBC, bigwig and all that. And he was in the line at the buffet table at the catering, and me and Jim kind of strolled in, and we had the hot pink tights on. And I remember Vince, he did like a double take, and he just about fell over, and everybody stopped. He said, stop everything. And I remember like I was getting a bun or something. He made us stop. He goes, don't move. And he walked around me and Jim about 3 times. I remember me and Jim were almost like, this kind of stuff, maybe we're going to get fired. I don't know. He circled around, he goes, whatever you do, don't change that color. He goes, the Hart Foundation's been missing one thing since they got here. It's color. And he goes, that's your color. And that's how it came about.
Nice, very good. Up front.
What is your most embarrassing moment?
It's kind of a delicate question, right, Bret? A bunch of them.
I remember one time being at a tanning place, and my brother Owen took all my pants. He took everything I had and put it downstairs, so that the only way I could go downstairs and get it, like the only way I could actually get anywhere, was to go down naked and get somebody's attention that my pants were missing. That would probably be the most embarrassing thing off the top of my head.
Excellent.
I have a question for Jim, actually. I was just wondering, who was it easiest to team with out of Bret and Owen?
Oh, that's an easy one. Owen was the easiest and best wrestler of the whole lot. Including British guys and everybody. Owen was as smooth and easy as you can get. When Bret starts a match off, he was real hard and aggressive, and he's getting his heat up real violently. And when Owen does the same thing, starts a match off and getting his heat up real aggressively, Owen gets his fingernails in the guy's back, goes, what are you doing? Owen was definitely a real smooth operator out there, and fun to be with.
Great. Right back, halfway back. There we go.
This is a question for Bret. In your book and various interviews, you were very against the path the WWE took during the Attitude Era. Very sexy, very crude. You've been fairly involved kind of recently, so do you think they've gone back to being more family entertainment?
Yeah, for sure they have. I mean, wrestling today is you're pretty safe letting your kids watch wrestling for the most part today. And I think I had a lot to do with maybe changing it back. I think I was fairly outspoken. I always thought, for me, pro wrestling is something that if your grandpa and your grandson can't go to watch wrestling, it's not worth going to watch. So I think wrestling should always be family entertainment.
Go ahead.
Hi, I just want to thank you guys for your years of service, and I'm sure everyone here appreciates it. My question relates to the late 80s, and you guys were one of the technical teams, and so were the Rockers. Did you guys have any backstage politics with some of the power teams at all?
No, you know what? We always got along pretty much with everybody. I remember when me and Jim first tagged up, when we first started in the beginning, it would always be in the dressing room and it'd be like some big, huge kind of earthquake. And it's like, I can remember coming up to Jim and say, "You got the big guy if he starts." And I said,
Yeah, right.
I got the little guy if he starts. And it worked because Jim, Jim can hold his own against any of those big guys like Earthquake and Tugboat and all those guys. There was a lot of big guys back in those days, and Barbarian and Haku, the Island. There were some big
Wild
guys that, I was quite happy to step back and let Jim start the match. And Jim was good at that. He could start the match with those big guys, and whereas they wear me down, and I couldn't be the technical wrestler that I was, getting mashed by these big guys. But Jim would go in and sort of take that load off my back, and then I would go in and do the excellence of execution stuff after Jim softened him up for me.
Go back to some old school wrestling since I grew up here in Calgary watching you. Brad, I'd like to ask you about fighting Bad News Allen, because I can remember you guys going through the aisles and chairs flying everywhere. And Jim Neidhart about Duke Myers.
Well, make it Duke Myers out of the way so Bret can go with Bad News. That's pretty good. You see that thing in my tooth right here? That's a Duke Myers head. Locked up in the turnbuckle. That had to be God knows how long ago. 83 or 84. And Duke Myers' tooth at the top of that right there. Man, that just fell off a couple days. Some plastic dental work. That's the old Duke Myers. He was a real good hand that Stu Hart insisted having guys, big guys like that there, that could really knowledgeable seasonal vets. He's a good dude.
Bad News was, he was no fun to wrestle. I'll tell you that much about him. He was, they used to call him a meat chopper. That was kind of what his wrestling description was in the dressing room. It was like, when you walked in and looked at the lineup and it's like, I got Bad News. It was like, it was always going to be a long night, a hard match. He was always a tough guy to work with. But, I think wrestling Bad News back in the old Stampede days, it was, he was hard to say he was in his prime, but I'd say he was in his prime then as far as toughness and speed and stuff. And when he came to WWE a few years later, he was a little older now and a little, I think his injuries caught up with him a little more, and it was a little easier for me to work with him. But those old Stampede days were tough. He was really hard to work with. I don't miss them, those matches.
Over here.
I have a question about the Coliseum home video you guys did.
Years ago?
With the office and the tag belts in the back.
Big stalls on
and answering the phones and stuff. What was the concept with that? Or is there anything that happened that day that's...
You know what, it was kind of sad because we went to New York and it could have been so much better. Like, I remember saying to him, I said, why don't we could film this thing up in Calgary at the Hart House, and it could be like the real Hart Foundation kind of video, we'll call it. But they were like, no, we got it all fit. They did it kind of their way, and it was kind of thrown together, and it was kind of cheaply done, and it is what it is today. When you watch it, it's like, it could have been way better if we didn't have enough clout in those days. Like, we'd suggest stuff, and it just they knew better than we did. Like, it's funny how the industry works sometimes. Like, I remember me and Jim, we were really popular and really over, I think, at the time, but we couldn't get it to market us or merchandise us with T-shirts or anything yet. And we kept saying, we know we can sell something, merchandise, and because a lot of guys were making a lot of money on merchandise and the token T-shirts and the posters and the things that whatever they marketed for you. And they finally came to me and Jim with this idea that we're going to do see no evil, hear no evil. And you probably remember that poster where Jim was plugging his ears, and I think I was covering my face, and Jimmy Hart was covering his mouth. And I can remember when they were doing it, I said, this poster, it sucks. And it's not going to sell. I can tell you right now that my fans are not going to buy this poster because I'm standing there with my face completely covered up with my hands. It's not going to sell. And they did it their way, and it didn't sell. And it's like 6 months later, me and Jim are doing jobs for the Rougeau brothers, and they're going, well, you guys couldn't get over. And it's like, because you couldn't sell. And it's like, it's not us, it's you guys. And I got them to do a little blank tank top, hoodie, or not hoodie, like a black tank top that had me on the front of it. And it sold like crazy, because it was a good looking tank top. And it was the only WWE tank top, and it sold like crazy. And suddenly they started marketing us, but it was always like, you know, it's those little things, they blame it sometimes on the wrestler when it's not necessarily the wrestler's fault. You know, it's just a bad idea.
Excellent. There's a slew of questions over here. We'll try and get to them all.
Okay, this is still on the topic of the marketing and everything. One of my fondest childhood memories was the action figures, the Bret and Hart action figures. It was really cool because he was tall and had all the pink and stuff on it. What did you think of some of the action figures and stuff that came out of it?
I think for me, like, that was the coolest thing that ever happened in wrestling for me. I mean, if someone could have told me when I was about grade 3 that someday I'd be immortalized in an action figure, I would have thought that was the coolest thing imaginable ever. Like that would, and it still is. It's up there with the biggest things that I mean, it was a real thrill seeing yourself in a rubber doll. I mean, it really, even like Jim Powers, it still was pretty cool. Same with the baseball card or the wrestling cards. I remember when I first saw them, I thought, that's so cool to be on a card. I want to keep this card forever. I don't know if I got one left today.
I was going to ask you guys still have memorabilia in your house?
Some of it,
Yeah.
yeah. Hard to find a lot of good Hart Foundation stuff, I'll be honest. It's most of the stuff I had, like, you know, the Hart Foundation, the box set of the dolls of me and Jim, I think it's worth about $1,000 if it's unopened today.
So Bret, how many different dolls did you have made of you since the very first one? They're real big and hard.
Probably about 10, 15, something like that.
Yeah, 10, 15 different ones, different outfits, different.
Yeah, I got some pretty cool ones. I think anyway, I've always been really happy with how they give me the abs and all that. I got some huge guns for some of the bigger guns than Hogan and some of those dolls.
I want a doll like that. Oh, sorry, up front.
Other than the obvious choice of Canada's greatest athlete, Iron Mike Sharp, who would you say are some of the best Canadian wrestlers, past and present?
Well, I think for sure Owen was, you know, one of the greatest Canadian wrestlers. You know, I think there's a lot of people that worked with Owen that pay tribute to him today, but there's a lot of people that didn't get a chance to work with him that don't know how good he was. He was really, really good to work with, just like Jim said a few minutes ago. Lance Storm was a really good wrestler. Despite the very dark black ending that Chris Benoit had, but prior to that, he was a great wrestler and a great guy. You know, prior to that, there was always a lot of, you know, even the Rougeau brothers were good wrestlers. You know, and even Rick Martel was a really good wrestler. A lot of the French Canadian wrestlers were really good. They were really skilled. They were different than out west here, like Calgary, but they were really good in their own right. And there was a lot of good ones, French Canadian wrestlers. I personally rate Edward Carpentier as one of the greats of all time.
Okay, we'll go here and then we'll go to the back.
This is a question for both of you. How did you guys become the Hart Foundation?
Well, it was kind of, I think it was my idea. As I remember they had passed down the good news to me that they were going to call me Cowboy Bret Hart. They gave me the big news that I was going to have a horse and I was going to sell my wrestling figure with the horse, and I didn't even have a wrestling figure yet. So I was like, okay, like I got pretty excited about it, and I rode with Jim from Toronto up to Brantford, where I just found out the good news that I'm going to be Cowboy Bret Hart. And Jim couldn't stop laughing all the way up there. All the way down to Brantford, which is where they did the TV taping. But I remember Jim kept turning around and looking at me, and he just started laughing. And it made me feel a little self-conscious. I kept thinking about it like, shit, maybe I shouldn't be a cowboy. And I remember thinking about it until I finally thought, by the time I got to the town, I remember I said, I don't want to be a cowboy. I do not want to be a cowboy. And, that night when the show was over, I went and knocked on the guy that was in charge of all that, and the boss, Vince's right-hand guy, and I remember knocking on his door about 1 in the morning. He was all cranky, and he just went to bed and all that, and he was like squinting through the door, and I said, he goes, what is it? And I said, I just want to tell you I don't want to be a cowboy. And he couldn't believe it. He was like, you're kidding me. This is going to be really big. You're going to have a horse in the box. You know, this is going to ride out to the ring and a horse. A different horse in every town. And I told him the truth. I said, you know, where I come from, you better be a real cowboy if you want to pretend to be a cowboy. And I'm not a real cowboy. And I don't want to pretend to be one. I remember he kind of felt bad for me. It was almost like watching somebody make this big mistake with his career and his life. And it's like, he said, put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, well, don't worry. He says, we'll come up with something for you. And I said to him, I said, how about Jimmy Hart's managing Anvil, Jim Neidhart? And I said, we all got the last name Hart in our names. Why don't you call us the Hart Foundation? And he said to me, he goes, you could never be a bad guy, ever. So, but don't worry, he said, well, something will come up for you. So I remember the next day, I think I pulled Jim aside and I said, because Jim was actually doing really well for himself back then. He didn't need me to be sort of shackled with at the time. And I remember thinking, it's not really fair for me to present this idea like me and Jim, when I hadn't even talked to Jim about it. And so I pulled Jim aside, I said, I don't know if it's okay that I mentioned that maybe they should throw me and him together. And I remember Jim was like, that's great, love it. It'd be great to tag up with you and all that. And he was all positive about it. And a few weeks later, they signed the Bulldogs. And as soon as they signed the Bulldogs, they, well, actually, it was a few days before that. But I remember, actually, I showed up at the Poughkeepsie TV tapings in New York. And I drove through a snowstorm to get to the show, for the TV show. And when I got there, I wasn't on the card. Like, they took me off all the TV shows, like, for the next 3 weeks, because they'd shoot 3 weeks of wrestling all in 3 week period, like in one night. And I remember I got real mad, and I told that same guy that was my boss, I said, I'm gonna call you tomorrow. And he knew I was pretty mad about driving all the way there and being off. And I remember I thought about it, I dialed the numbers, and I was gonna quit in the morning. And I called him up to quit. And I said, first thing I asked him, I said, what are you gonna do with this? With me? Tell me what you're gonna do with me. And I think he knew I was gonna quit. And it was like this sort of make or break moment. And my whole life could have changed in a second. And I could have been back here in Calgary working at Turbo pumping gas or something. I just remember he said, we're gonna do exactly what you want us to do. We're tagging you with Neidhart, we're calling you the Hart Foundation. And I was like, really? I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I remember thinking about it for a second, and I was like, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. And I remember thinking, I said, now I can show everybody how I can wrestle. Because as a good guy, I had all these guys that didn't want to work with me or didn't want to do much with me. And they set the pace in wrestling. If you don't have a good bad guy, like if your bad guy is slow and lazy and doesn't want to do much, and just wants to lie on the mat most of the way through the match, and you're not going to have a very good match. But now that I was a bad guy, I could control the pace of the match. And me and Jim, if you look back at those old Hart Foundation days, we could really set a pace, and we started to have some really good matches, especially with the Bulldogs. And that was what happened. The Bulldogs got signed, and they needed someone to work with the Bulldogs, because the Bulldogs were a very different style than a lot of the American guys were used to. And me and Jim stepped up to the plate, wrestled the Bulldogs, who were like their big stars then, and we got the Bulldogs over, but in the meantime, we got ourselves over. And that's the story of the Hart Foundation.
Okay, all the way to the back.
I'm sure a lot of us will agree that you guys have one of the greatest tag teams in the history of wrestling, and great individual workers. Of the current crop of wrestlers out there today, wrestlers you haven't faced, who would you guys have liked to have faced both individually and as a tag team?
Well, I don't know of any tag teams that are worthy of mention. WWE's kind of killed tag team wrestling, and it's my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, because I'm not speaking from a fact basis here, but it's my understanding that Vince McMahon hates tag team wrestling. And he just got sick of it, and he doesn't like it anymore, he doesn't want it anymore, but he kind of lets it continue, but he's got no heart for it anymore. And so you don't see any great tag teams because they don't want to make any great tag teams. They've purposely kept a lid on the tag team wrestlers, and they do that same thing with the girl wrestlers. And you know, I love tag team wrestling. It's a whole different kind of psychology than what you get with two single wrestlers. It's a whole different kind of match, and I love tag team wrestling. And a lot of the girl wrestlers today, they're really good wrestlers, really good athletes, and really skilled. And Jim's daughter, Natalia, is as good an example of that. You know, there's a lot of guys I wish you know, when I think of being guys I could work with, I would love to wrestle Punk. 1997 bad guy, Bret Hart, Canadian American basher guy, would have been great against John Cena today. I mean, I would love to have been a bad guy against John Cena. It would have been so much fun. I don't know, Jim, anybody you wish you could have worked with?
Bret, you haven't forgotten about those matches that we had against each other in the Hart Foundation tour, which is sold out everywhere in 1994 over the world.
And yeah, I do remember those. I do remember Jim slammed me in one match. It was like my hips were on ball bearings. I thought my hips went right through the floor. Jim could slam me through the floor of a mat. Not too many guys could pancake you like Jim could.
Some of those matches are on YouTube, the Madison Square Garden one between you two, it's pretty crazy.
There's one match of me and Jim wrestling in Germany circa 1981. We were both pretty young bucks. And Jim was wrestling every day, and I was off every night. It seemed like every night for like 3 months. We had this tournament over there. And I remember being kind of mopey and sad and all that, I was bummed out because I wasn't working every night. I wanted to wrestle, and every night I was sitting in the dressing room I got paid the same whether I wrestled or not. So I made the same money Jim did. And Jim, in the meantime, was working every night and really working really hard. And finally they threw me and Jim against each other. I don't even remember why they threw me. We had to wrestle each other. And I can remember I've been off for quite a while. And I just watched this match a few months ago when I was trying to get this Dungeon collection of DVD matches for WWE, for that new DVD that came out. And I watched this match with me and Jim. It's so funny because I kicked Jim right in the gut as hard as I could with the toe of my boot. You can see Jim's face, like he just looks at me and it's like, easy! Easy, and I remember it was like, I've been off. I was like, I've been off for a really long time. And I was
really did hurt, by the way. Still feel it.
But to watch it it's an old black and white video that I watched, and it was just so funny to watch it because I waited for it because it's the only thing I remember from the match was that kick.
Playing a ninja.